Why has it unravelled? What's happened? We were sort of, do you think that we were kind of, in the general sense, the world was sort of chipping away, I don't know, and then the pandemic hit, and then we sort of shot out the other side and things have started to sort of unravel on a global scale from that?
Yeah, I think there's been a range of things going on for some time, and they've actually been magnified and accelerated by a range of different things. Changes in technology, that collective, horrific, difficult human experience of COVID, disinformation, a range of things. And underlying that, or part of what has kind of ridden the wave, I think, of some of those issues has been people's engagement with politics, but also of those generally who have influence over people's lives. So that includes often the private sector as well. Edelman's been doing a survey for a number of years which tracks people's trust in politics, but also trust in the private sector too. What's been really interesting over recent times is not just their increasing mistrust, which has always gone through waves and cycles around, often mirrored by things like the global financial crisis. But in more recent time, mistrust has turned into a sense of grievance. And that sense of grievance, you can understand that if people are struggling in their lives and they don't believe that there's an adequate response by people in leadership, or they see a growth in inequality, that builds a sense of grievance. And with that sense of grievance has also come an increase in this survey in the number of people who are willing to engage in what they call in the survey hostile acts they see as justified as a consequence of the sense of grievance. And so for me...
So check that out and think about this world we live in today. Sense of grievance justifies a hostile act. Now, but it doesn't necessarily mean a physical act. But you think about all those people who are now possibly still in the chat going, she said we were going to be kind. Look what happened to me. Look what happened to me. Therefore, I'm going to. What happened on the front, if we're talking COVID, what happened on the front lawn of Parliament in early 2021, I think it was. January 2021, I believe. Could be wrong. Could be 2022. It's all a bit of a blur. Hostile act, hostile takeover area, dummies, effigies going up into the trees that are being hung. Think about what's happening, Posey Parker over in Melbourne, the Nazis turn up, hostile act, but it's justified. And this is the thing. If you have a sense of grievance, right, you've got a grievance against you that gives you the right in your mind to have retribution against that act, even if it's physically violent, but certainly hostile is okay. Now, hostile doesn't have to be violent. It can just be the way you're acting. But I think it's a really interesting perspective. Agree or disagree with what Jacinda's saying. I think it's a really interesting perspective. And it's certainly the perspective, I think, Chewie, that we've seen. The reaction to my grievance is a hostile act. It's very smart.
Yeah, and I think it's an industry. I think there are people out there that can weaponize these people that may think that they've got a legitimate grievance. And maybe if someone took the time and sort of go, well, look, here's how it is. Do you not understand? Let's walk through it together. Instead, they've got somebody talking in their ear, whether it's on a website or a forum or whatever, telling them that no, there's some way to weaponize this or monetize this for my benefit. So I'm going to spin up this army of aggrieved people.
Yeah.
There are so many of them. The #1 podcast in the world. Fucking hell. And this is something that we've never had before. Like the emergence of, and I guess, we're sort of part of that. The emergence of a new format of media, of how people connect. We've never had to deal with this. And then along comes a global issue like COVID.
Yeah.
That forced the issue for so many people. They fell down holes and some have stayed there, some have crawled out of them. And then we're into, boom, the next crisis. The next one.
You've just said something really interesting, though, yeah? That's twigged something in my head. And it makes me think about feeding that algorithm. So you may or may not know this, but on YouTube at the moment, when the right bitches and moans, that really hits the algorithm. And so what that means is the right bitches and moans more, and it hits the algorithm. And a perfect example of it here in New Zealand is Duncan Garner. Duncan Garner's shows last year on the internet were pretty much middle of the road. He was critical of everyone, and it wasn't doing very well numbers-wise. He came back this year. They changed their thumbnail style. It was all very much pointing at the camera and accusatory and and hostile. And I remember we looked at the page once, and I was like 9 or 12 thumbnails, like 8 or 9 of them were negative about Te Pāti Māori. And his views now have gone through the roof. And so it's feeding the algorithm and this grievance to a hostile act. If you can then provide content to encourage the hostile act or to feed the hostile act, at the moment it's very lucrative. It's very lucrative on your side. And this is not a woe is us, but when you're even though we happily sit on the left, but we spend time and we are fairly balanced, we call balls and strikes and that kind of stuff. We don't leave blood on the floor. It doesn't hit the same algorithms. The algorithms are set up for conflict and for hostility. So what Jacinda's saying here about this grievance culture leading to hostility, you then got content creators providing an outlet for that hostility by feeding the grievance culture. And it's just doing this.